Hello everyone, Francis Walshe here again with thedigitalmerchant.com, and today we're going to be looking at the best alternatives to FE International. Now, FE International is a well-known player in the mergers and acquisition space. It works a lot with, I suppose, mid to larger cap online businesses that are looking for an exit. And we're going to be comparing it today to some other platforms that provide this type of service, ranging from kind of, buyer-seller platforms right up to kind of the more full-service M&A brokerage style firm. So let's get into it. So first of all, what does an M&A advisor do? Now, as I mentioned just there, M&A advisors are distinct, I suppose, from buyer-seller platforms in that the company takes an active role in helping you as a seller to find an appropriate buyer, to find someone who's going to offer a proper price for your business and who's a proper fit as a buyer. And so they'll work with both parties to make sure that everyone is getting a valuable transaction. So essentially, they'll guide you through selling your business right from the point of initial inquiry to closing your sale. And they'll handle valuation, outreach, and due diligence. So valuation is actually a key one. And that's something that's going to be a big differentiator between platforms because they do use different valuation methods. And I know some platforms have been criticized for the way they handle valuations, and there are cases in which listings don't proceed based on the valuation methods that platforms use. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail as the video goes on. Then negotiates terms, manages legal and financial documentation, helps you avoid costly mistakes. That's another really crucial one because the greater the value of the transaction you're looking at, the more important it is to have a really experienced assistant on your behalf, on your side, I suppose, who will help you through it and who will help you to navigate the potential costs associated with it. This obviously, if you're dealing with $1 million plus transaction or whatever it is, if it's a big part of your portfolio, if it's important to you, you really do want to be investing in a partner that will help you avoid the pitfalls that can arise, because there are a lot of potential pitfalls. And acts as an expert coach and deal maker from start to close. So essentially they will help you through every aspect of the sale, and they will just ensure that you are getting a value for your business that is appropriate for you. Now, of course, the level of service and the nature of the service does vary from one firm to the next. And I suppose that is essentially the point of this video. We're going to dig into the firms that provide the best services, their price points, and which type of firm is most suited to which type of company, because there is a degree of specialization here as well. Certain firms do tend to deal more with certain types of businesses than others. So we're going to look at FE International first, and then we're going to look at a number of alternatives and kind of make comparisons between them. So FE International is a very well-respected player in the M&A space. It's a more traditional style of brokerage firm, more so than, we'll say some of the platforms we look at here will be more recent. They specialize more in kind of, providing a platform for online businesses to buy and sell. FE International is a kind of more traditional firm. So essentially, it's not really an online platform. You're not going to have a public listing here where you list your business and you'll have buyers approaching you directly. You'll go to the firm and they will work with you to get your listing up, and then they will find buyers on your behalf and then, broker a deal from there. So the pros and cons of FE International, I suppose, and this is a theme that will recur throughout this video, but it really does depend on where you're at with your business, what type of business you are, how big it is, the type of revenue it's generating. So I suppose first thing to be aware of is that the success rate with FE International is very high. They do close 94% of listings successfully. Their team is made up of, qualified experts. You have your CPAs, CFAs, people with a lot of experience in the deal-making space, which is really important too. And they specialize in tech, and they really do offer that kind of high-level, white-glove approach. So, that's obviously great if you're dealing with a high-value business. That all does sound good. Now, the first con, and this is a big thing for me, and to be honest, it's kind of a real drawback when it comes to FE International. There's no upfront pricing. So with most of the other platforms we'll look at here, they will typically have a listing fee where, the number of months you spend on the platform, you build per month. And then they'll also have a success fee, which is essentially like a commission that comes off the top of your sale price. That can range kind of from 8 to 15, even 20% in some cases, depending on the tier you go with and depending on the firm, obviously, and depending on the size of your sale. You don't get that information upfront with FE International. And that for me is a huge drawback, because what I would recommend typically is looking at a number of these platforms and getting a feel for which one represents the best value for you. It's very difficult to do that if you can't get upfront information about pricing. The second issue is that buyer access is restricted. As I said, this is not your kind of online platform situation. It's a more traditional brokerage firm. So they're going to find the buyers for you and only put you in contact with them at that point. This is a little bit more typical when you get into bigger sales, because obviously if you're dealing with something very high value, you don't necessarily want to be dealing with a lot of unserious inquiries. But for, I suppose, at the smaller level, it is maybe a bit of a disadvantage because you could do with a higher volume of offers. So again, that kind of just depends on the sector of the market you're at. If you're kind of a mid-market and below business, FE International probably isn't for you, and we will look at some alternatives that might be a better fit. And yeah, may not suit startups needing fast, budget-friendly sales. That's kind of tied in with the second point, really. It is more for higher value businesses and that are looking for, mid six figure and up sales, I would say. So yeah, so let's have a look at some of the alternatives and see what recommendations we can make. So QuietLight. QuietLight is a platform I have discussed a few times on this channel. I'm a huge fan of everything they do. I think they provide a great service for businesses looking to list. It was set up by an entrepreneur, and they only hire entrepreneurs and people who have gone through exits themselves as consultants. So that means, you're getting a really high value, a really experienced service when you sign up with QuietLight. Unlike FE International, they are very transparent about their pricing, and it is relatively reasonable, I would say, based on the market. Big advantage of them, I think, is that they've got a really realistic approach to their success rate. So what they advertise is that they get 85% of businesses sold within 90 days. Now, that's not as ambitious as some things you'll see on like other platforms we're going to look at here, but I do think it's, that realism is probably a better way to go. I would question perhaps the truthfulness of some of the marketing claims of some of the other platforms in this space. And I just think, if you're pursuing a serious business sale, 3 months isn't an unreasonable amount of time to be waiting to get it closed. So yeah, huge fan of QuietLight, huge fan of everything they do. I think they cater to a similar sector of the market as FE International. And to be honest, if I was at that sector of the market myself and pursuing a sale, I would look at QuietLight before FE International personally. Now, Flippa. Flippa, you can probably think of as the opposite to the likes of FE International and QuietLight. It's very much a bilateral platform upon which sellers and buyers kind of interact with one another. There's no real brokerage service coming from Flippa. That means it's typically cheaper, and particularly for businesses at the lower end of the scale, if you're in a kind of a 4 or 5 figure space, I think this is a great place to do business. If you're getting into the higher end of things, I think there's just too much time wasting involved in Flippa, really. You're going to be dealing with quite a few unserious buyers, even scammers as well. There's not that much vetting on the platform when it comes to buyers, which means pretty much anyone can reach out to you in relation to your business. This might not be that big of a deal if you're selling a small blog or a small website or even a lower end startup. If you're in that kind of lower range when it comes to valuation, I think there's a lot of good business to be done on Flippa. If you have a more serious business, I would just skip it. I would look probably at QuietLight would be my recommendation there. So Acquire.com. Acquire.com really specializes in SaaS startup sales. You can even see it here on the homepage. It has tried to diversify out of just this in the last few years, but it did originate as a platform for the purchase and sale of SaaS startup assets. While it has diversified away from this to a certain degree, I wouldn't really recommend going with Acquire unless you're a SaaS startup, to be honest. I think the business is really geared towards that type of asset. And I think if you are a SaaS startup, there's a lot to be said for that. And I'm a big fan of specialization in all of these kinds of discussions. I think it's really important to work with a service that knows exactly what it's doing in terms of your particular business. But if you have a different type of business, I would probably look elsewhere. There's a lot to like about Acquire. I think that the platform is really intuitive. I think there's a lot of high quality buyers there. And if you're a SaaS startup and you're in that kind of mid-market range, I am a big fan of it. But if you're not, I think you should probably look elsewhere. Now, Onfolio. Onfolio is actually different really to anything else we're looking at in this video. It's not a broker and it's not a buyer-seller platform. It is actually an acquirer of businesses. So it will buy your business from you and then try and sell it on itself. It really is for the upmarket range of businesses. It will only look at potential purchases that are generating 500,000 a year or more in profit. Now that's profit, not revenue. So it is quite a big figure. But I mean, they really are a high class company. They've acquired a lot of interesting assets. And if you're in that range, I would definitely have a look at them. Even if you're not 100% sure, I do believe that if they decide that you're not suitable, they will refer you on to a brokerage. So it might be useful to go for an initial consultation anyway and see what they've got to say. But yeah, this is really for the higher end of the market. I mean, if you're not a really well-established company and a profitable company, this just probably isn't for you. Now, Empire Flippers. Empire is a really well-respected name in this space. They've been around for a long time. And there's quite a bit to like about them. They've got quite a good vetting process, so you're not getting the issues you'll see on the likes of Flippa, where there's a lot of unserious buyers trying to get your attention. And they've got a really good record of getting sales over the line in a relatively quick period. To be honest, though, I mean, again, this is essentially a comparison video. I think they cater to the same segment of the market as FE International and QuietLight. And if you are in that segment of the market, I would recommend QuietLight over Empire. I think the expertise that the consultants with QuietLight offer is just better. The vetting process isn't as painful with QuietLight. And I think they offer better value for money. So yeah, I mean, if you have an existing relationship with Empire or you've heard good things about them, they're definitely worth looking at. I think a lot of people do a lot of good business there. But I wouldn't certainly recommend them ahead of QuietLight. Now, businessesforsale.com. This again is something a little bit different to some of the other platforms on this list. It's been around quite a long time, and as such, it kind of predates the boom in online business that we've seen since the turn of the millennium, I suppose. It does deal with a lot of kind of brick and mortar businesses. So even just here on the homepage, you'll see, we've got a rental property, we've got a restaurant, we've got a sport fishing business, a luxury beach resort, all brick and mortar physical location businesses. So if you're trying to offload something like that, I think there's a lot to be said for businessesforsale.com. I think it has a huge network of qualified buyers, and I think it comes in at a really low price point as well compared to other platforms on this list. And it does do a certain amount of online business sales as well. So if you have an online business and you'd like to have a look at it, certainly do. I would, though, if you have kind of a more online based business, and I do suspect that most of the people watching this video are probably coming from that direction, I would recommend going with one of the other options we've discussed here. I just think they offer that specialization that you're probably not going to get here. But certainly if you have a brick and mortar business, I would definitely check out businessesforsale.com. So yeah, I suppose in summation, is FE International right for you? To be honest, in most cases, I would probably say no. And the reason is that it does provide quite a similar service to QuietLight. It caters to similar companies at similar revenue levels. And I just think QuietLight offers a better service. The lack of transparency around pricing with FE International is a big concern for me. And then if you're a DIY seller or you're on a lower budget, then you're better off looking at something like Flippa. So I just don't think it really caters to any segment of the market better than its competitors. So I would recommend QuietLight for that segment of the market. And if you're pursuing a lower value sale, I would probably recommend Flippa. But yeah, I mean, have a look at all of them, do your own research. Every platform I've mentioned here does have a record of delivering good deals for buyers and sellers. So I suppose to a certain degree too, it's up to your own comfort level and what you feel okay about. But yeah, they're my recommendations. And that's all from me for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.